Guthrie, are you on, and do you know if we yet have a quorum?
We appear to have a strong quorum of 9 members on the call. It would be helpful if those members could turn their cameras on just to verify that they have in fact rejoined the meeting.
That'd be great. Thank you, Guthrie.
Did Guthrie say a bare minimum?
Excuse me, I should have spoken. A strong quorum of 9 members.
Yes, thank you so much. And we will reconvene our meeting. We're at item 9.0, but I wanted to make add an additional piece of information. Guthrie has informed me that we have received an additional 21, I believe, written comments, and they have been added to the online agenda. Just a note that they came in, they were delayed because they came in through a third party and were quarantined before they could be released. So that's why they're coming in a little late. So they weren't late in being submitted. They got stuck up in the process of our security system. But they are there for you, and I think they're mostly, all of them, I believe, are related to the tribal grant. Wanted to call your attention to that. And with that, I think we'll move on to item 9.0, which is strategic planning, and I believe we have a report from Veronica. Thank you for joining us. Glad to see you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the Commission. For the record, I am Veronica Dujon, and I am the Director of the Academic Policy and Authorization Unit at the HECC. And what I have before you today is an informational item. As you might recall, the HECC is responsible for doing evaluations of each of our institutions, our public universities, every 2 years. And the purpose really is to assess their contributions to state objectives for higher education, and as well the Commission's strategic plan. So these are, you're seeing, are really previews of the full reports that will come to you for approval in a subsequent meeting. And the ones you see today are from our technical regional institutions: Oregon Tech, Western Oregon University, Southern Oregon University, EOU. And they are, as I said, are summaries, and they are intended really to provide you highlights of what will be apparent in the reports that you will approve later on. So it's really early context and areas where additional information or clarification may still be needed. And if you have any comments or additions or questions you might like us to include, we will certainly be doing that. The summaries rely on information the institutions already produce, for example, accreditation reports. They are the institutional framework responses, and these frameworks were developed in collaboration with the institutions early on in the HECC formation. And they really solicit information about students, about the institution, research, and so on. And the reports also include state and federal data. It's an iterative process, and we ask the institutions to review the 2-page drafts. We also ask them to review the full reports prior to bringing them to you, because we want to check for any mischaracterized information or sections where the institution itself will be filling in, and we would want to have all of that information present before we have the full reports. So the information we have, especially the data, it's information that the institutions give over to the HECC. So when they see it again, we're really just verifying information that they have given us. The key areas that are highlighted are areas of Commission interest that support, as I indicated earlier, the state objectives. And these tend to be, or these are essentially about student success as measured by degree completion, access and affordability as measured by equity across socioeconomic groups, for example, racial and ethnic groups, regional groups. And we also report on academic quality and research, there's now a substantial section on financial sustainability and continued collaboration across the universities in support of the state's mission for higher education. In this round, as in every round, we as staff recognize that institutions are managing significant workloads and they do have competing priorities. So there are times when the two-page reports are not fully developed or elaborated, but there will be opportunity, and we continue to work with the institutions between now, as you see these 2 pages, and the full report to make sure the reports are complete. So at the time when we were preparing these, when we initially prepared them, there were some areas of information missing, and you might still see that in the reports as they are today. And with that, as I indicated, the 2 pages are really summaries, highlights of what will show up in the full reports later on for your approval. And if you have any questions or any clarifications that you would need, I am happy to take these and address them as best as I can.
Thank you so much, Veronica. Do you have any commissioners have questions for Veronica on these university evaluation summaries? Okay, thank you so much. We'll move on to the next item, which is an action item, competency-based education report. Welcome, Shirley.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Heyman, Vice Chair Semnett, and members of the Commission. For the record, my name is Shali Hodson, and I'm a policy advisor in the Office of Community Colleges and Workforce Development. And I'm going to share my screen. Okay, is that working?
Yep.
Okay, great. I just need to move you all. Okay. So today I am here, as Chair Heyman mentioned, for an action item presenting the annual report on competency-based education for your approval and then subsequent submission to the legislature after any updates are done that need to be done. So I have some slides for you today, and we'll go through this fairly quickly, but I did want to give you some background for new commissioners in particular. The legislature has asked us and requires us to report on these 6 elements for competency-based education every year. And this is competency-based education in our public colleges and universities. And so all 6 of these elements are addressed in Table 1 of the report, which I'm sure you have seen, and each one of those maps to a section that answers it or addresses it. And so today we'll walk through this in a little bit greater detail and then take questions. So this year, we have some things that are new and different. One thing that isn't different but is moving in a really great direction is the work that Emergency Medical Services, or EMS, is doing. And that work is led by the Oregon Health Authority, just for some context, but we also support the work at HECC. And one of the big milestones or big progress points in this work was that competency-based assessment was adopted in OHA rules in January 2025 as the way that EMS instruction is now delivered in our state. And so we have the first year of operation complete under the belts of the colleges and OHA, and have some great progress to report on that here in a minute. I do want to note that this has not really changed the concern or the challenge that we have with seat time. And so competency-based education, when implemented fully, can accelerate time to completion. In Oregon, that is challenging because of the way our funding works and how seat time works and how faculty are paid. So we'll get into that again later as well, but just for some context there, this is really, the EMS work is really focused on the assessment piece of competency-based education. And then the other thing that is new this year is earlier in the year, we received a question from a dual credit partner who asked us about proficiency-based grading. And in examining that question, it really showed that our existing standards do resolve most of the question, but there are some pieces that we plan to investigate further in the coming year about how proficiency-based grading shows up for colleges and what that transparency from the high schools needs to look like. Okay. So the Emergency Medical Services, or EMS, update is here. And this is pretty exciting because they started in 2022-23 with about 44 courses that were using competency-based assessment, and continued to work with faculty, did a lot of professional development. Leslie Huntington is the person who has presented with me in the past, and she leads this work at OHA, and she's just tirelessly worked with colleges and the one university partner to teach them about competency-based education and to help them integrate it, and as now is required by rule. So we have 16 community colleges and one public university that are approved at the EMT level. 8 community colleges are approved at the advanced EMT level, and 3 of those are EMT intermediate. So lots of great work has happened on this to move it from just a few folks who raised their hands and said they were willing to try to now implementing across the state. And I would say this is one of the more robust competency-based programs in higher ed, at least in our state. We do have other examples in career and technical education, but this one is probably the most formalized and again, the most robust. So you can see on the table that the number of courses has risen from 68 to 72 over the last 2 years. EMT did have a dip, but OHA says that those are 2 or 3 planned courses that ended up not happening because of staffing reasons. And so we're still, again, way above the baseline where we started with this work. So on the proficiency-based grading question, when the question was raised, I think the person assumed that a proficiency determination had to be carried to a college grade. And they were really concerned about how that was being standardized and what that looked like. And after some great conversations with the accelerated learning team at HECC and other folks, it was great for me to also learn that the dual credit course is cataloged as a college course, and the grading and transcription follow the college's standards. So that initial sort of panic on the dual credit coordinator's part or concern was really not the issue. So the dual credit standards do require attainment to be measured using grading standards and assessment methods comparable to what happens on campus. So that issue was really very quickly solved. But there is still this narrower issue, and it's really in that assessment-based learning credit. So where credit rests on a college assessment rather than an enrollment in a course. And so thinking about how grading works in both the high school and the college under the assessment standards, we really want to dig in and make sure that it's happening the way it's supposed to be happening in these situations. The model doesn't currently require curriculum alignment or registration and transcription practices. And so we plan to ask some questions for dual credit coordinators and folks who do this work over the next year to see, is this really an issue, or is it a one-off question that we received? So this was a great opportunity to dig into some of that. And while I was contemplating the question and trying to understand it, I looked at some of the national research and just learned a few things that were pretty interesting. By and large, students coming out of standards-based or proficiency-based high schools and high school programs perform really well in their first semester at a university. The coursework really finds no significant difference in college readiness measures, and overall students are prepared. Admission staff that were surveyed in New England in a consortium really didn't penalize proficiency-based transcripts. They really just wanted clear documentation of what those proficiencies meant. And so again, it comes back to transparency and communication and being able to back up what those grades are. There is a cautionary tale or case out of Maine where they created a proficiency-based diploma in 2012, and it was repealed in 2018. And what was found later is that it didn't work because there wasn't a common definition of proficiency across districts. So again, that definition problem, that transparency, that consistency is sort of the key to all of this. And I think Maine's lesson is really about high school transcripts and should be taken that way. While we have the Oregon standards for college credit earned in high school that resolve a lot of the problems that Maine dealt with. So again, just a little more background on this issue that we will continue to look at over the next year. So back to competency-based education in general. There are multiple barriers to expansion, and I've already mentioned one of them, which is the funding. The funding for colleges and universities that comes from the state is based on clock hours, seat time. It makes the feasibility of scaling models that award credit on demonstrated proficiency and then can help students accelerate very difficult. So that's been a constant challenge as long as we've been reporting on this and trying to expand it. And so the conversation continues about funding. One of the new barriers that we determined out of what Oregon Health Authority is doing and what they've learned in working with the colleges and their university partner is really about staff turnover and the risks related to staff turnover, which with competency-based assessment seem to be even higher than in a traditional classroom. A new instructor has quite a bit of onboarding just as a new instructor, but as a competency-based or competency-based assessment instructor, they have even more sort of professional development and onboarding. And what OHA is finding is that there are colleges and universities that have part-time instructors doing this work, and it can be challenging to carve out the time for the professional development. The consistency from one instructor to another may not be there. And so the barrier or the risk is really that as folks leave, the knowledge goes with them and it can be hard to replicate or rebuild. OHA is working on this, as they've noted it as an issue, and they are convening faculty over the summer. They're building an orientation, and they're also building some mentorship resources. So we're hoping that that will help solve some of that. So the recommendations this year are really to continue to support what's happening with the emergency medical services programs, that OHA and HECC would continue to support those programs and treat instructor development as just a thing that needs to happen, a recurring cost. And that will involve partnership with the institutions, because it is ultimately the institutions that bear that cost. And so as we continue to work with OHA, we are also hoping to work with them on student data and measures and better understanding how many students are going through this model and what kind of impact that may be having. So that's in the year to come. The second recommendation is really about examining this proficiency-based grading and college credit through the annual dual credit reporting. And as I mentioned, we'll be surveying folks and trying to understand really what this issue is and how big of a deal it is and whether we need to do more with it to resolve anything. And so I'll come back with those findings next year. And the third recommendation is really to consolidate this report. As those of you that have heard this before, there's a lot of overlap between this report and the credit for prior learning report, which you will see me in December for. And I'm recommending through the House Bill 3026 reporting study that we consolidate those two reports and really reduce that duplication, reduce the staff time to gather all of this and get it reported. And so that will that information on House Bill 3026 will be coming to you in more detail in the coming months, but a little bit of a preview on one of the recommendations that will be there. And do you have any questions?
Anyone have questions for today? I have one. As you know, first of all, I'm excited to see this kind of progress on assessment-based learning. Even more now, I believe it needs to play a critical role in our future. I'm wondering, back when we moved to some of our coursework onto asynchronous online instruction, we created a capacity to call that, the necessary number of seat time, even though we can't document it. What prevents us from doing something similar with proficiency-based learning?
That's a really great question, Chair Heyman. I don't think anything prevents it. I think there are models where colleges will offer multiple courses. Welding is a good example of this. And so they'll offer multiple courses at the same time. And the student can probably progress through more than one, or at least more than 1.5 during a term. And so I think there are ways to do it, and people are doing it. It's just not systematically happening.
Yeah. Well, good. I guess the place because I think one of the critical limitations to our moving aggressively into this area is the way in which we define funding. And I'd like to think that there's a way to think about the accomplishment of the learning without regard to the number of hours it took for a person to accomplish that. And it seems to me we're able to do that with asynchronous online courses. So I guess I'd just like us to think about, I wonder if there's a similar model that we could approach for proficiency-based. So,
right.
Any other comments or questions? Then this is an action item. I would ask for a motion to accept this report.
Mr. Chair, I move that the report be accepted.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Denbrough. Does someone second?
I'll second that.
Oh, thank you, Commissioner Middleton. Appreciate that. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thanks so much. And thank you so much for your report, your work on this.
Thank
I
you.
think we move on to another action item. It's the Sexual Misconduct Reporting Annual Report. Anyway, welcome, and we're ready.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Heyman and members of the Commission. My name is Rowan Frost. I'm the Sexual Misconduct Policy Analyst with the program, Academic Policy and Authorization Program for HECC. And this report is a statutory requirement. We are required to report on the progress and any violations or omissions that colleges and universities have made toward implementing sexual misconduct laws in the range from 350, 335 to 346. So the report contains information that was received from the colleges and universities about their ability to comply with the law. I noted areas where they are experiencing challenges. One of the biggest challenges for colleges and universities with meeting the needs of their students in terms of advocacy services, resources, and prevention education is simply having the funding in order to be able to do that, and also being able to partner with local domestic violence and sexual assault agencies, which have been experiencing their own funding and organizational issues. Despite that, the colleges and universities made really great progress this year. One of the requirements that they have a memorandum of understanding with that local advocacy agency. Many of the colleges and universities were able to comply with that. So we do issue waivers for colleges and universities that are unable to obtain a memorandum of understanding or to be able to offer advocacy services. And we needed to issue many fewer waivers this year. I'm happy to take any questions if anyone has any.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Commissioner Devlin.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, this is, I believe, the beginning of my 5th year on the commission. And some of these reports seem like deja vu every time they come up. And I've always been kind of interested in this report because what it appears to give us, and this is probably the statutory requirement, is, those institutions that are engaging in what are primarily considered best practices in this area of concern. What it doesn't give us is any indication, and I'm not looking for individual case details or even, but it doesn't give us any idea of whether there are increased reports of sexual misconduct at various levels, how well those are being resolved, both particularly for the victim. And I almost feel like every time I hear this report, it's like I have half the report. I know the people are engaging. Who's engaging in best practices? I don't know if reports are going up or down. I don't know if the best practices are actually doing what they're supposed to do. And maybe part of that is that this is dictated by statute of what will be reported. But it would seem to be beneficial, at least as a commission on higher education, to have some information on whether reports are increasing or decreasing and how many what percentage are being resolved satisfactorily. It's like we get half the story. It'd be nice to have the other half of the story.
May I make a couple of comments?
Sure, please,
Great.
you're welcome to do so.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I feel like we are seeing half of the story here, and you're correct that the number of reports does not necessarily reflect what students are experiencing on campus. One of the misconceptions, I think, is that if a school has fewer reports, that must mean it's doing a better job. And unfortunately, many times when there are fewer reports, it simply means that students don't trust the administration or don't know who to go to at the administration to have their issues resolved. I think the part of the story that we're missing here is the data that's going to be coming out of the sexual misconduct survey. So if you'll remember, the survey was released to colleges and universities last fall. They have until September of 2027 to implement the survey. The survey asks students, what have you experienced? Who did you tell about those experiences? And did you receive any support or help when you did make those reports? So I think that the summary reports that we get from that survey will be strictly numbers, but they will tell a much more complete story about what's actually happening on campus.
Okay.
And this again is really ancillary, but there are other challenges that the schools are experiencing. The funding that's been available for prevention and for advocacy on campus that was there maybe 3 or 4 years ago is no longer there. Colleges are kind of struggling to try to figure out how to implement best practices. And although there are a couple of organizations at the state that do a great job of providing technical support, they're not receiving a lot of leadership at the federal level on how to best ensure that their students are safe and have access to their education regardless of the experiences that they've had.
Thank you for that explanation.
Yeah.
Other questions? It's a difficult issue. I was an HR director back when we implemented mandatory requirements in education for sexual harassment, and the difficulty of discerning the difference between actual levels of harassment and the quality of reporting was a challenge, and I think never fully resolved. And I think we have some of that issue reemerging, I think, with this reporting requirement. I'm not sure how how to resolve it. I do appreciate your recognition of that, and it's an important issue. I'm just not sure how to get at it. So, but I think the goal here is, I think Commissioner Devlin has indicated, how to create awareness, mostly greater awareness and the greater capacity to address these issues as they occur in our students' lives. So I appreciate your effort here. Anything else for this? This is an action item. We're moving to accept a report here. A motion?
I move to accept it.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
A second.
Thank you, Commissioner Smith. All in favor of accepting this report?
Aye.
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 Thank you again for this work, and we'll move on.
Thank you.
We are now looking at the strategic activity of funding. This is item 10, and we are going to move into a presentation discussion of the annual budget request. Executive Director Hannon, I believe this is yours.
Well, I'll kick it off. I'll invite Jim Pinkard and anyone that he wants to join from his team to join me on camera for this item. I think we'll keep our presentation pretty short because what you have in today's packet in terms of a proposed agency request budget is quite similar to what you've seen at your last couple of meetings, specifically the July meeting at which you had a special meeting to dig deeper into the sort of questions and issues that were associated with the development of this proposed budget, in your June meeting where we gave a comprehensive presentation on elements of the budget. A few numbers have moved around, but not by much. The only that has moved significantly since you last saw the funding levels in this budget is the debt service figure, which is calculated externally by the Department of Administrative Services based on the the debt obligations of the state associated with our prior higher educational capital investments. So we don't control that. That has changed. It's based on essentially interest rates and repayment, et cetera. So that is incorporated in these updated figures. Otherwise, any adjustments here are very, very slight since you last saw the presentations and the overview of the budget. Just remind commissioners that you're operating this year under and staff are operating under direction from the governor and the chief education office, or sorry, the chief financial office, that have limited the ability of the agency and the commission to request new resources over and above the current service level for our agency budget. We've talked about this significantly at length at prior meetings, but just a reminder that this budget likely doesn't express the commission's full view of the full needs of higher education and workforce development in Oregon, in part because it is limited by the restrictions that the governor and the chief financial office have placed on agencies in requesting new resources, given the larger kind of macroeconomic and budget issues facing the state. The policy option packages here that are included as item 10.1C are again substantially identical to what you've reviewed before and are areas where the agency qualifies for an exception to the overall instruction not to request greater than current service level within this budget. Finally, commissioners should be aware earlier this week, several days after we posted the bulk of the commission's materials, you received from staff a draft letter from the chair to the governor for your consideration today that would, if adopted, be included in our transmission of this agency request budget at the end of the month. That letter expresses both your appreciation and understanding of the larger dynamics facing the state's budget and the governor and the legislature in needing to adopt a balanced budget next year under, facing a lot of challenges, and your support for greater levels of investment in higher education and workforce development that are contained within this agency request budget. So that's there today for your consideration as well. I'm sure that Jim or myself or other members of the team would be happy to respond to any questions that you have about specific items. Again, I'll invite Jim if there's anything that he wants to either correct or add to what I said in this overview to jump on and do so. Otherwise, we can probably move into discussion.
Great. Thank you so much. I will jump on for a second. And I want to acknowledge that our Vice Chair, Commissioner Simnett, has joined us, and welcome. Glad to have you here. I would just reiterate, something I said earlier today, just a recognition that all the testimony we received, and I think we as commissioners fully acknowledge the insufficiency that is represented in the agency request budget. But we also acknowledge the instructions that we've been given and the framework for the request that is being presented to us for approval today. And trying to find a way of saying both of those things, submitting a budget that meets the criteria that have been given us, and at the same time being strong in our voice that we want to make sure that it is clear that from this commission's perspective that this agency request budget is inadequate, that it does not represent the true needs of our institutions and our students, and trying to find, and I think we have found, a balanced way of making that point, and that's really what we're. So I guess I want to make sure that nobody feels that if they approve this budget, it means we're okay with it. Okay, it means we have approved the budget that we have been directed to submit within the rules that we were given for constructing that budget. And then at the same time, we want to make clear that we believe this level of funding to be inadequate. So with that introduction, I will call first on Commissioner Devlin, because he put his hand up even before we started, and then we'll move on in that conversation. So Commissioner Devlin.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I stated I'd like to have a little bit of extra time here. I have some questions and then I have some comments too. First of all, it's a relatively minor thing, but I appreciated within the budget report here the citation to the statute about what the commission's role is. And I think Ben has talked about this before. We have been granted in statute significantly more autonomy than most agencies would have in reacting to an executive request or requirement. It doesn't mean we wouldn't comply with that request or requirement. It simply means that we are supposed to accurately reflect what we think the budget needs are in accordance with the requirements the governor and the legislature placed upon us in terms of objectives. And I don't know if Ben would want to comment on that, but it's an interesting dynamic because in one sense, we are a commission that's supposed to be doing those things. And we are a state agency, and the staff of the state agency obviously are part of the executive branch and have to comply with the chief executive's direction. If Ben wants to comment, that's fine, but he's spoken to this several times before. I just want to say I appreciate it being put into this report. I'm waiting to see if Ben's, the pictures on my are so small, almost.
I'll let my prior comments on this stand. Thanks.
Okay.
Commissioner.
As you know, I've been asked by the commission to hopefully get some more movement on the issue of how current service level is calculated. as reported earlier, I did get about a 30-minute telephone conversation with the governor. She indicated that she would try to get me 2 meetings that included DAS. Prior to that meeting that we had, I had meetings with our staff here at the commission, so we'd be prepared. I'm hoping to have a second meeting, but I'm trying to time the meeting when it might be more productive, because we're right in the period now where all the agencies that have this delayed time for submission are submitting. I'm hoping to get in the next meeting, which we didn't get in the last meeting. We did at least have the DAS analyst for higher ed in the meeting, and we had the governor's liaison for higher education or advisor. And of course, we had our staff, but we did not have the CFO who we had hoped to have there. And it's literally the CFO or the DAS director or the governor that can give us some assurances that some of this analysis will be done in the coming interim. I don't think much of it's going to be done between now and the governor's recommended budget or even during the legislative process. But we can't really fall to the problem that we had last time, which was by the time you start the process needs to end. So we really need to start soon after the legislative session is over. In computing the current service level, most of you understand this now. There are 5 things that the DAS looks at. 2 of those areas are pretty straightforward. That is the PERS costs and the impact of PERS side accounts. Those are pretty much numbers that exist. I mean, they're not really flexible. They're taken, they get adjusted as we go through possible increases to the actual increases that are imposed, but there's no real room there for any further adjustments. One area that the colleges or the universities and the colleges highlighted was this requirement on healthcare that they fall within this 3.4 and 3.4 per year increase in healthcare costs. Some of them have pointed out that they have issues because for those of you that have been part of group plans, either in the private or public sector, sometimes your cost depends upon who your possible providers are. And in some areas of the state, they don't have all of the providers. And while PEB and OWEB are both required to theoretically meet this standard, they're required to meet it overall, not in each individual area where people are getting services. So some of these colleges and some of the universities may or may not experience costs, but that's something that could probably be analyzed internally. Then the next area has to do with what's called other costs or operating costs, and whether that's really comparable to what a state agency has in those costs. I think there are differences between what a state agency would have in those costs, what a university would have in those costs, and what a community college. I mean, community colleges are public institutions, but they are not state institutions. Regardless of what people believe now, while universities are not state agencies, they are state institutions. And as such, I think they are different from colleges in terms of operations, but it would be worthwhile to do an analysis in that area to see if these are comparable areas. And this may impact figures in different directions if they're not comparable, may or may not. Then the final area is what they call, I believe it's called something like other personnel costs, which is strange labeling. Sometimes you see this in state government and other governments. That's really the majority of the costs. That's salaries and benefits that don't relate to healthcare or PERS and some other things. That's roughly 57% of the cost for the universities. That's where we get into this dilemma of whether they should be at the state rate or non-state employees. Now, you probably can't jump right to the state rate because of how the colleges are organized and the differences between them and state agencies and how they're organized and how their information is reported. But it would appear that you could take a more in-depth look, which is something that we need to do prior to the next reiteration of current service level, to see if there's a hybrid that might more accurately reflect the university's costs. I was charged by the commission to look at the OUS support levels and not necessarily the community colleges. Maybe an area for community colleges also, but it's actually more complex there than it would be at 7 state universities in trying to figure out how you would approach this any differently. Basically, what they do in computing CSL is they look at these 5 areas. They look at the level of increase. They look at how much that particular area represents in the overall cost. Then they look at what the state appropriation was in the last biennium, and they increase that appropriation by that percentage. That is underlying the biggest problem with current service level. Because what has happened now is they have institutionalized the state's level of support for the E&G costs at between 25 and 26%. Long before this budget, we have highlighted, I believe, last year, and maybe in some other documents, that this is not a format that's going to work in the future. It is not sustainable at this level to expect that students and their parents are going to cover roughly 2/3 of the costs of any increases. It's just not sustainable. U of O, not yet, but maybe within 2 years, the cost of attendance is going to go above $40,000. We only have one institution now that appears to have a cost of attendance of below $30,000. And our institution that is in the most financial difficulty is in one of the top 3 in terms of cost attendance. Not naming the institution, but you would know that. So I'm hoping to get another meeting and to get some agreement, and some agreement where we've got something directly from the DAS director, the CFO, or the governor, that we get this analysis done in the interim, long before a new CSL budget is developed. I know the difficulties that the legislature is in this coming budget cycle. I will not really voice my opinions as strongly as I want to by saying that part of the problem obviously is the federal government, but probably part of the problem is the legislature in areas other than education has overreached its long-term capacity to meet those costs. But I'm just hoping that we can do this. The other thing I'm hoping for is when we communicate to the governor, and I really appreciate the letter from Ben, and I really appreciate the verbiage that's actually going to be in the budget document, but we all need to realize that that goes to the governor and does not go to the legislature. The governor's recommended budget will come forward. She may choose whether or not to include some of those in her recommended budget, but it doesn't necessarily go in the materials that the Ways and Means committees receive in general. And I think hoping that Ben will have a little bit more latitude, and that some commissioners and the chair will have a little bit more latitude to speak to the legislature about what some of the real problems are, still being in support of the governor's recommended budget, but clearly indicating the problems that this budget's creating long term. I was debating up till about 11 a.m. this morning whether to vote no on this budget, but I realize now voting no might not be a good idea at this point. But I wanted to put it on record. I'm in my second term. This will be my last term. I'll probably be both. I'll serve the 8 years total, and I'll be, I won't be too old, but I think I'll want to move on to other horizons. But I will be older than practically anybody on this call, with the exception of maybe, I don't know all the ages of the other, with the exception of the other former senator. But I would like to finish my 8 years at least having some impact on this discussion, because I think our ability to meet the needs of students and parents and the state is diminishing on a yearly basis. And more people need to speak up, and we need to find some way to solve this. Otherwise, I think things will only become worse. I might highlight one aspect of that, and Ben doesn't have to comment now. But from my understanding about previous discussions, we've gotten to about the $8,000 level with our own grant. We haven't increased that in the last 4 or 5 years, and I don't think we intend to increase that. And Pell Grants have not increased. So even those students most in need who've had these tuition increases for the last 4 or 5 years have gotten farther and farther away from meeting their needs. Now, some of that's filled in with fee remissions. Obviously, we expect some income from the student from employment, but we're going to experience more problems unless we can increase financial aid. And that does not even speak to the students that are not eligible for either of those, federal or state, that are being priced out of a higher education. Some of those that are probably very capable and probably represent some of the reasons why we are not getting the kind of numbers that we need to go on to our post-secondary institutions, particularly at the university level. Lastly, I'd like to comment on something that I might provide in a future meeting, but LFO does an analysis every time the legislature meets and takes action on the budget. And on their detailed analysis, on page 40 of that for the last budget, on page 40, they very clearly indicate from 89-91 to 21-23 what percentage of community college budgets have been from state support, local revenues, and tuition and fees. Tuition and fees in 21-23 were down to 30%. They're at about 66% for universities. Local revenue has finally started to pick up a little bit, and it's up to 26%, and the state's up a little bit to 43%. Comparable figure for universities is 25. If you look at this literally long period, you will see, you can almost, if you read the history into it, you can see the dot-com issues. You can see the passage of Measure 5 and Measure 50. You can see the Great Recession. And you can see the significant drop in enrollment, because when our enrollment was high in community colleges, we were one of the poorer funded community college systems. Now, since our enrollment is down significantly, we are not in the top by any means, but we are considerably better funded at a national level compared to a national level for community colleges. I just wanted to put all of that record on the record. And I did want to put on the record that I'm voting yes to be cooperative today. But this is the last time I intend to vote. I get one more time to vote for a state for a budget. I think last time there were at least 4 of us, maybe 6, that were prepared to vote no if we didn't get the assurance that the CSL analysis we've done. We thought we had that assurance. It never happened. So I will leave it at that. I will be voting yes, reluctantly. And any of you are free to vote yes or no, but there are ramifications.
Chair Heyman, you're on mute.
Okay, thank you. When we have that opportunity to address the CSL, I believe there are a number of actual structural flaws in the calculation, that is unrelated to the indexes or the data that we use to plug into that. And I'd be glad to, at some point, go into what I think those flaws are. But they're related to the fact that education is funded differently from multiple sources, and the CSL model doesn't adapt well to that truth. But we're not going to solve that here. But I appreciate your putting that on the record. I just wanted to, when we do get to that, I want to make sure that we look more comprehensively when we have that opportunity to how the CSL is calculated and the actual structure of that calculation, and not just the data that is put into it. So I appreciate that comment. Other comments, I believe Commissioner Dembro.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Heyman. Well, I find myself in agreement with former Senator Devlin. I too will be casting a reluctant yes vote on this, and for the same reasons that he gave. I too really appreciate the letter of transmittal that was given and that's being proposed. One of the things that struck me in that letter, though, is a recognition that something similar was expressed in the HECC 2024 letter. And, we all understand the very, very difficult budget situation the legislature faces this time. A lot of it, I think the large majority of it due to federal actions. 2024 was not a bad year budgetarily or economically. I mean, it was as challenging as all years are. But and I think we did make some progress, I guess, in 2025. I was already out of the legislature then. But if we can't move forward in the good times, what can we expect from the hard times? And I think what this conversation really confirms in me is our need to develop something like a 10-year funding plan. And I do hope that something along those lines, I've mentioned this before, but I'm hoping that something like that accompanies the work that the legislature is doing in House Bill 4124. At the end of the day, we know that having a long-term plan like that every year, we may have to take a pause. As Commissioner Devlin mentioned, there's the dot-com issue, there's the Great Recession. These things are going to come up. But overall, we need that long-term vision so that we can move incrementally to where we need to be. And I really think we need to take that very seriously. So those are my comments. I do have one other question, just because we continue to get inquiries regarding outdoor school. What happens to outdoor school in this ARB proposal? Thank you.
Jim, do you want to jump on for this?
Yeah, happy to. For the record, Jim Pinkard, Ops and Finance. Appreciate the question. We, in the ARB, have included a roughly $13.7 million increase for outdoor schools, which is about 28%, give or take. And so that's based on lottery revenue availability. The ballot measure back in, I think, 2016 that passed mandated that 4%, the lesser of 4% of lottery distributions, or 22 million per year adjusted for inflation, be allocated for the outdoor school program. So the lesser of amount for the 27-29 biennium is calculated by the state treasury is roughly $63.2 million. And so that is an increase from the current biennium total of $48 million. And so we've roughly estimated that if we assume a 2% growth in the number of students served by the outdoor school program, which is double the recent historical average increase, that'll be roughly $880 per student served, which is a 52% increase from the $578 per student served just 4 biennia ago in 21-23. So give you a rough idea of what kind of what we expect for that program in the ARB.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much. Other questions or comments regarding the agency request budget? Anything from you, Ben, before we move on to the vote?
So going back and forth on this. Yeah, I mean, I do think as a slight counterpoint to the the overall sort of narrative and claims here, I do want to just remind the commission of the findings that we have reported pretty consistently over the last several years to the commission about the rising affordability rate for Oregon students over the last decade. And that's a calculation that we make and feel like has quite a bit of integrity. It's not perfect. Affordability itself is a subjective term, of course, but we have a standard and stable methodology for calculating it that takes into account the total cost of attendance for students and then offsets that for many of them by grant aid that they receive, whether from the federal government, the state government, or the institution they attend. And the combination of multiple factors, including potentially reduced economic need on the part of students, right? Because this is a measurement of current students, not those who are shut out of higher education, but it's a self-selecting group in the sense of the students who have enrolled, and potentially some reduction in their levels of need or the greater levels of resources that they're able to bring to the table. Rising minimum wage in Oregon, which helps support their ability to earn and offset their costs of education through work, plus increased state investment over time, particularly in the Oregon Opportunity Grant, going back, a decade, that's roughly tripled in state investment and increased institutional aid. And then during the pandemic, a very large increase of federal support for students through their institutions has contributed to a pretty notable decline in the number of Oregonians, or the percentage of Oregon students who we measure as facing unaffordable costs. That isn't to minimize the data that Commissioner Devlin cited about tuition and total costs associated with Oregon higher education. Those are real, and many students do face the full burden of $30,000+ in total costs at Oregon public institutions, and as Commissioner Devlin noted, sort of pushing towards 40 at some public universities. But I don't want to ignore the impact of some of the other efforts that the state and federal government over the last decade and a half have made to offset those. So it is at the same time, I also want to acknowledge, even with that slightly more positive spin, those measurements, to the extent that we can tell, compare them to other states, Oregon still looks like a real outlier in terms of greater burdens associated, even taking into account the slightly more good news story about rising affordability rates. We nevertheless know that Oregon students are taking on greater debt and face more barriers than they do in neighboring states and across the nation as a whole, the national average as a whole, and that's true for both sectors. So I want to I want to try to sort of make sure that we're presenting a balanced picture. And I guess the final thing I'll say on this is that it is also the case that the Oregon legislature and Commissioners Devlin and Dembro were a part of this over a decade plus, has made significant biennium over biennium increased investment in Oregon higher education. That has tailed off some over the last couple of biennia, but in spite of cost pressures coming from other sectors and the need to balance the budget, we have seen in Oregon, even with the recent sort of leveling off of state investment, we have a history here going back to 2011 of increased state investment that still is among the top in the country on an overall basis. I think that what you'll hear from institutional administrators is yes, but our cost increases have outpaced that, and that's where the CSL question, right? When you take into account the rising cost of PERS, of healthcare, of employee salaries, then we're still struggling to, even with that history of greater levels of state investment, we're not able to balance our budget without cuts or other very painful decisions. So that's my kind of final sort of really pulling back the lens, even further on this, request that's before you today. It is certainly a challenging moment for higher education in Oregon. This budget certainly leaves much to be desired, as expressed through your letter, and Oregon has made some progress over the last decade and a half. Final thing I want to say, Mr. Chair, and probably should have begun this with this, the development of an agency request budget is a enormous undertaking for any state agency, and certainly one as complicated as the HECC. What you see at the commission are summary documents that do our best to take a whole bunch of technical work that runs ultimately to more than 1,000 pages of both narrative and technical sort of budget worksheets, and summarize them for you to digest and provide feedback on. And we've been doing that for months via the commission. But what sits underneath this is a really extraordinary exercise and set of activities conducted primarily by HECC staff, now under the leadership of Jim Pinkert and Tom Reel and the teams that they lead. And it is they are working sort of day in, day out within the budget system to produce this agency request budget, a very, very small fraction of which you've seen via these commission materials. And I just want to acknowledge and appreciate the many HECC staff who've been working now for many months to put this together, and will continue to work over the next couple of weeks to finalize it, particularly the narrative sections that are threaded kind of within the budget reports that are at the core of our end of August submission, assuming your approval today. So I wanted to give a shout out to the whole team, and then finally also acknowledge the role of our partners in helping inform that work, both through commission level activity and then a lot of less public conversations that we have with institutional administrators in particular, who are advising us in order to be able to support and advise ultimately you. So thanks for the time with that final comment, Mr. Chair, and look forward to your next steps.
Thank you so much. I have two operational issues that I want to address before we move forward. One is it necessary, there are separate items, is it necessary to act on the ARB and the cover letter separately, or can they be acted on as a whole?
Mr. Chair, I think it's entirely up to you. You're certainly welcome to take those in a single motion. Right. I don't think there's any procedural reason to have to separate them.
And I am going to propose we act on that as a whole. I do want to clarify to all of you that in order to pass this, we need 7 affirmative votes. I'm grateful to hear a couple of you reluctantly already committing to voting for it, but it does take 7 votes. Because this is such an important issue, and because we know exactly how many positive votes we do, I want to do a roll call vote. I do see, before I get there, I see Commissioner Andrews has, I'll call on you, Commissioner Andrews. Yes?
I think I can make my statement during the voting process. Thank you.
Okay, it looks like Commissioner Devlin has a comment as well.
Mr. Chairman, I'll try to keep it short, and it will not be a counterpoint to Ben. I think it's good that Ben's pointed out some of the positive sides of things that have been achieved. I have a tendency to look at the glass as half empty and not half full. And so, I always get a little bit depressed every time we put the affordability index for community colleges and universities, and then we put them together so the universities it doesn't look too bad, because you can bring up the university's affordability by combining it with community colleges, which are still, fortunately, they're not as affordable as they should be, but they're still far more affordable than the universities. Finally, I think in communicating to the legislature, it's much harder than people realize, in the sense that the advocates that go forward to the universities, many of the members are extremely busy. They're extremely busy in areas other than the budget. Many of them never want to serve on a budget committee, even if they're very interested in an area, because they have to face too many realities on a budget committee. But the other thing is, it's hard when you're trying to advocate to individual members who you'll come in and you will say, well, the budget for this or that is inadequate, when the response you get from the member is, well, they have told me that it's at CSL. That's as far as you'll get with some members. That's as far as the level of inquiry, and they will think the issue is resolved. So that's one of the reasons it makes it very difficult in this current process to communicate to legislators that while this may be the DAS CSL factor, there are problems with how that CSL is produced. And I'll just leave it at that. And I wanted to thank Ben again for his comments, filling into the side of the glass that's half full.
Thank you. Additional commentary? We haven't heard from everyone. I just want to make sure you all have an opportunity to add your perspective before we move into a roll call vote. Yes, Vice Chair Sinman.
Thank you, Chair Heyman. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Excellent. I don't have much to say. Much of what I feel has already been said much more eloquently and with much more knowledge and experience already. But just to contextualize my vote, I will be voting for the budget, but it will be very reluctantly along for the reasons that have already been stated. I also just wanted to underscore the appreciation that I have for the work, the enormous amount of work that has gone on over the past several months, and the work that the commission itself has done in asking questions. I think that it's important to highlight all of the many discussions that we have had at the FNA meetings, as well as our main meetings over the budget. And I feel that as a whole and collectively, our comments and our questions do express a concern, and it's a concern that I feel, even though I will be voting in the affirmative for the budget. So thank you, Chair Heyman, for the opportunity to contextualize my upcoming vote.
Thank you so much. Anything else? Yes, Commissioner Smith.
Thank you, Chair Hammond. I also our general dissatisfaction with the state of our state budgets in general and in higher education in particular, I think have already been stated, but I'd also add, just from my perspective as a worker at a university, this type of budget where there isn't a set line item for expected cost of living increases in the budget, which is something that I think we can look at maybe through 4124, other opportunities. It creates a dynamic every time we have contract negotiations where the university administration and workers, whether they be, faculty, graduate employees, student workers, or classified staff, are in real conflict with each other, and it creates long, drawn-out battles. Some disparaging comments. I mean, there's a battle being waged on our campuses every time we need to ensure that employees of the university system can live and thrive in our own communities. And I just think that's an unfortunate side effect of the way that our budgeting is done. It would be really great to understand that we do need to have our wages commensurate with cost of living, and to have that kind of projected out in budgets would save a lot of grief and conflict and turmoil. So I'm just plugging that. That isn't really something that is on the table right now in this budget, but it is something that I think would behoove us to seek peace moving forward.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Commissioner Smith. And I appreciate that. I just want to acknowledge that this conversation is part of the record, and I think it provides a really helpful context for the vote that we'll be taking. I think it will help, to more fully represent, the action that we're taking here. It comes down to a yay or nay vote, and that is really reductionistic. It's something. What's happening here is bigger than that, and I think the conversation we're having now is a record of the greater concern and that we have for this. So I appreciate your offering those comments and making that part of the work we share here. With that in mind, Guthrie, I want to ask for a roll call vote on this. So we will be voting. Point of order?
Yes, point of order. Has there been a motion on this?
There has not yet been. No, there has not been. Would you like to make a motion?
Well, since I'm stuck with it, yes, I will. I move adoption of the agency recommended budget, that it be transmitted to the governor along with the transmittal letter.
Thank you. Is there a second for that?
Second.
Thank you, Vice Chair Simnett. We now have a motion on the table. Guthrie.
Yes, thank you so much. I will now call a voice vote. Greg Heyman, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Emily Simnett, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Demetrius Davis Boucher, how do you vote?
Abstain.
Michael Dembro, how do you vote?
Aye.
Richard Devlin, how do you vote?
A very reluctant aye.
Devin Lawson, how do you vote? Commissioner Devin Lawson. Perhaps we can come back. Teresa Martinez, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Jen Proctor Andrews, how do you vote?
Reluctantly, yes.
Mary Middleton, how do you vote?
Reluctantly, yes.
Jennifer Smith, how do you vote?
Yes.
And just returning, Commissioner Devin Lawson, are you on the line and would you like to vote now? I will just note, Chair, that is 7 in favor, 5 abstentions, 3 of which are by way of absence for Commissioners Edwards, Coker, and Yamasaki. The motion would pass with 7 in affirmative, pending any vote from Commissioner Lawson.
Guthrie, I think we had 8 yes votes. I mean, as you said, it passes either way, but let's just double check the.
Yes.
Yes.
Votes in favor: Greg Heyman, Emily Simnett, Michael Dembro, Richard Devlin, Teresa Martinez, Jen Proctor Andrews, Mary Middleton, Jennifer Smith. You are correct, Director Cannon. 8 in favor.
The motion has passed. And I thank you again, all of you, for your engagement with this conversation. And we move forward with this budget request, fully acknowledging our concerns that go with it. And there we have it. I think we're a little ahead of time, but we can take our break or move some other item in front of it. I don't care. Director Cannon, any guidance here?
Yeah, I'm just double checking our participants. Hang on a minute. I think that we will spend, you can plan on about an hour of additional meeting time. It could be longer than that, Mr. Chair. But I would expect about an hour of additional agenda time plus maybe a few minutes for the good of the order. So given that, perhaps if you're going to break, now would be a good point to do it.
Okay. Let me ask a different way of framing it. Item 12.0 is there is the remaining action item. I want to make sure that we will still have a quorum by the time we get to that point, or if there's some advantage to moving that one. But
I think we should move it. I think that's a great call. Guthrie, why
Yes.
don't you take us into that?
Thank you so much, Chair Heyman, Vice Chair Simnett, members of the commission. Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Guthrie Stafford, coming to you in my capacity as your commission administrator. As a state commission, the HECC operates under a set of adopted policies and procedures. These policies may be adopted, amended, or repealed by a majority of the members of this body at any time. Adopted policies must be consistent with the laws of Oregon, and this action item proposes amendments to these policies and procedures. The Commission last adopted its policies and procedures in February of 2022. Today's proposed updates are included in the redlined edit in item 12.0A in your Commission packet. These changes fall into three categories, comprising amendments summarized non-exhaustively as follows. The first category includes updates to conform with statutory and other policy changes, such as amending the makeup of the commission regarding Oregon's 6 congressional districts, updating enumerated commission policies, policy setting authorities to reflect statutory amendments since 2022, updating the name of key partner organizations, and updating public meeting law and government ethics law provisions in accordance to statutory amendments since 2022. The second category includes recommended updates to remove or simplify by citation duplicative policy that originates outside of these bylaws. This includes removing entirely policy number 9, covering administrative rules as duplicative with the Administrative Procedures Act, ORS Chapter 183, and HECC's own administrative model rules of procedure. This category also includes replacing in numerous areas statutory text with statutory citations for a variety of definitions to prevent these policies from becoming outdated by future amendments. And finally, it includes removing public records retention provisions as duplicative with state records retention schedules defined by rule. The third and final category includes proposed updates for best practices, such as for HECC chairperson and vice chairperson selection, amending term length from 1 to 2 years and adding limit of 2 consecutive terms, clarifying commission authority to direct HECC staff, clarifying non-subcommittee member commissioner role when attending a subcommittee meeting, and updating more descriptive and inclusive terminology for learners and partners. I apologize, that was a bit of a rigmarole, but suffice to say, the Commission received its required 10-day notice of proposed amendments on July 31st and was asked for questions or comments. We did not receive any since that time. HECC Council has reviewed these proposed amendments for completeness and sufficiency, and it's the recommendation of staff that you approve them as drafted in your packet. I will pause for questions.
Thank you, Guthrie. Any questions for Guthrie on this change in our rules? If not, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Devlin. A second?
Second.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. We have approved the update in HECC policies and procedures, and thank you for your work on that. Thank you, Ben.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Yeah, just having, this is probably as good a spot as any, having adopted that policies and procedures manual, just to remind you about the way it talks about commission voting procedures. There are a couple of things that may sort of strike or even surprise you. One is, as it relates to motions, keen readers of this and perhaps former legislators will find that motions do not require seconds, according to these policies and procedures. Now, it has long been the culture and the practice of the commission to use seconds to motions, but I'm perfectly happy to defer to the chair's preference and the commission's preference on whether to continue that practice, but I will note that it's not required by your policies and procedures manual. The other point here relative to voting, and again, this is not new, but the statement, and this is on page 14, and this is long-standing, is that all members are expected to participate in voting unless a conflict of interest, and we've actually amended that to say now an actual conflict of interest arises. And the meaning of participate in voting, and it's clear when you look at the exception for having a conflict of interest, is that you vote aye or nay. Now, I think it's a little unrealistic to hold a very rigid view of this, because one can abstain from voting simply by leaving the room, or in this case, dropping off the line and being marked as absent. That is effectively has the same effect as an abstention, and it has the same effect as a no vote, because our requirement is that for a motion to pass, it must achieve a majority of votes of appointed commissioners. But I do want, again, it's awkward to sort of call any of this out in the midst of meetings, but since you just adopted this policies and procedures manual, I did want to remind the commission that your policies and procedures don't require seconds to motions and do require voting aye or nay, unless you're absent, in which case it is effectively an abstention or which has the same impact as a no vote. Thanks.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Commissioner Devlin.
just as a way of background, just to point out that some bodies are very strict. The legislature, you can vote yes or no. You cannot abstain. You cannot vote present. You can be compelled to vote. You can be brought in by the state police if they find you to vote. They're at that level, because if you have a very controversial item, there might be 10 members in the Senate out of 30, or 15 or 20 out of the House that would not rather not vote on an item. So it's almost a necessity.
Right.
That you have to vote. You have to make a decision, A or nay. So.
Yeah, I'm on one of the county's planning commissions, and I cannot abstain. I have to vote yay or nay. So yeah, that's pretty standard. Yeah. So
Mr. Chair, I will just add, following on Commissioner Devlin, that we are, as legislators, of course, you're elected to represent a constituency, and you're expected then to represent that constituency, and an abstention is not considered representing the constituency. Having said that, Senator Devlin can also, I'm sure, remember an incident where I believe it was a Senate member who brought his sleeping bag in, and spent the night on the floor holding up the vote on a bill. Were you there for that, Senator?
I was there for, I think I was in the Senate by that time, but I know which
Okay.
House member it was.
It's a House member, right?
Yeah. And I remember he got up and spoke several times during that. How he didn't feel it was fair that he'd be compelled to vote. But I also remember a member, and I won't cite them either, that said 50% of my constituents are in favor of this measure and 50% are opposed. I'm voting with my constituents.
Well, I am maybe in a future conversation on should we adapt our practices in response to our clarification of our policy. I'm not really ready to address that right now, but perhaps at a future time we can, when we have a shorter meeting or less, we can see if there's anything we want to do there. But thank you, Director Cannon, on enlightening us on that. And we're going to move into a break, which now it actually is the right time to take a break. So we will come back at 2:50. Well, welcome back, everyone. It is 2:51, and so we are going to enter back into our session. And we are looking at strategic activities pathways 11.1. This is the developmental education overview. And I believe Donna Llewellyn is here with us to make that presentation. So welcome, Donna.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Heyman, Vice Chair Simnett, and members of the Commission. For the record, my name is Donna Llewellyn, and I'm the Director of the Office of Community Colleges and Workforce Development. I'm here today to provide you an update on what has become a very popular topic, developmental education and the work we've been doing to improve student outcomes. Next slide, please, Guthrie. So just a quick reminder for all of you on the background regarding this issue. For those of you who may be newer, just need a quick refresher. For over a decade, Oregon's community colleges have been working to address the matter regarding developmental education and slow and significant gaps in student persistence. As a reminder, the legislature took interest in this topic with the passage of Senate Bill 1522 in 2024, and we'll talk about that more in depth in a couple of minutes. You might also recall a very eye-opening presentation to the Commission in fall of 2024 by Director Amy Cox and Shonda Halawapo. Next slide, please. Some of the key takeaways from that particular presentation included that most students who began in developmental education math didn't graduate from college or transfer to a four-year institution. The impacts are disproportionate and affect traditionally underserved students in greater numbers. And despite the efforts of faculty and students themselves, those courses that are designed that were designed set students on a college path that often results in barriers and a lack of credentials. So I just wanted to ground you and remind you of some of the information you'd received up to this point. Next slide, please. So some of the recommendations that came out from that Senate Bill 1512 work group way back in December of 24 included what's on the slide. So we should implement co-requisite student support models, co-requisite courses for Math 105, 11Z, and Statistics 243Z should be implemented, and a co-requisite course for Writing 121Z should be developed. Another set of recommendations coming from that Senate bill work group was a uniform set of metrics to be developed and measured across all the colleges, the development of one STEM-focused developmental level math course. There was a recognition that no statutory or legislative changes were needed, and there was also a recommendation related to multiple measures and informed advising. So just a reminder of what those recommendations were. Taking those recommendations into account, next slide, please, Guthrie. This graphic was developed. It's the timeline we've been working on together with the President's Council and the Oregon Community College Association. It's one that we agreed upon in order to address some of those Senate Bill 1512 recommendations. And I just want to take a moment to thank OCCA and the President's Council for their continued support and leadership of this work and their willingness to lean in and support their staff and faculty as we've navigated these waters over the past couple of years. In this graphic, you'll see 4 key areas of focus: the student or the Community College Support Fund distribution formula discussion. I'm going to provide a very brief update on that today. It's my understanding you will be digging deeper into that particular piece at your October meeting, but I wanted to let you know that there was deliberate connection between those 2 pieces of work. Most, if not all, of the community colleges have begun implementing some of these strategies on their campus. And this is just designed to help assist their institution in implementing the changes to co-requisites, and also around the CTE math alignment work that will really be the focus of our conversation here in a little bit. And also, there is a recognition in this graphic that we are going to need PD for faculty and staff. For instance, advising faculty release time to do math alignment and other necessary activities on campus. Next slide, please. Like I mentioned, Jim will cover this in further detail with you in October, but I did want to answer a few questions that have come up pretty frequently in the past few months as it relates to FTE reimbursement. So as we were going through this work, the Community College Support Fund work group was looking at developmental education and what we might do with regards to funding, etc. The agency staff reviewed several models in partnership with business officers related to the elimination of developmental education funding. And what they found was there's very little projected change in the overall individual college funding due to a variety of factors, including the growth management component and student enrollment projections. And where there was movement, we wanted to also point out that these courses account for approximately only 1% of the overall statewide FTE. So it's a very small pocket of students, and we're seeing very minimal effects within the funding formula should we just turn the funding off. Another point we want to point out is that colleges will still be allowed to offer developmental education, math, and writing courses, just not for reimbursement. And this is very similar to what happened back when the legislature decided they no longer wanted to use community college support fund dollars to pay for things such as hobby and recreation courses. Community colleges still offer those for their communities, but they do not receive state support funds to support those activities. Next slide, please. So I want to talk a little bit about how we went around discussing the CTE math alignment. We took a very collaborative approach. We recognized that this conversation was of great importance and has long-reaching implications. And as such, we designed a collaborative approach to ensure transparent information sharing and open communication channels. We developed 2 teams with a very narrow focus. We had a math approach team. They helped inform us about timelines. They talked to us and provided information and feedback to me around what kind of information should be collected. We actually did a survey last fall with the institutions. They helped provide insight into who should participate in the CTE Math Experts team and why. And they also helped us take a look at the data that was collected from the feedback phase in early 2025. We are in fall of 2025. We also had a math experts team. This was the group that really rolled up their sleeves and dug in. They looked at what gaps exist between adult basic education courses and college level math. They talked about how those gaps might be addressed and where. They took a look at CTE math courses and how they should be aligned. And then they worked together to identify and align student learning outcomes, course numbers, and names for the math courses. That might sound familiar because we built this work on the Common Course Numbering Promising Practices. And the group also used the National Career Clusters framework to help us identify what sometimes it is known as meta majors when clustering and looking at different areas of study. Next slide, please. So we had, as I mentioned, a very collaborative approach. You'll see here we have the MAT, so the math approach team, the math experts team, and then you'll see a third box. At the recommendation of the approach team, we identified career technical education, a point of contact, and a math point of contact at all 17 community colleges. They served as our conduit of information, both to and from the institutions, as we were moving through the alignment exercise. So wanted to share with you a little bit of information related to the surveys and the information that we reviewed. Next slide, please, Guthrie. So that survey that was sent out to the points of contact highlighted a few areas. One of which is that the recognition that through this, the collaboration between math faculty and CTE faculty is critical to the successful implementation of this redesign effort. Existing college level mathematics pathways are often misaligned with the applied mathematical needs of career technical education learners. Not everyone needs to learn trigonometry and algebra, and we've been talking about that for a really long time. Institutions identified a need for contextualized and career relevant mathematics instruction, and this was the part that was very interesting to me. There was significant variation across the institutions in both math requirements and course offerings, including numbering, credits, and course learning outcomes. The group identified over 350 courses in this developmental education area being offered in statewide CTE programs. And there was significant overlap, but a lack of the alignment, as I mentioned. And then, as I mentioned previously, support for the work needed to be provided. So we do need to recognize that it's going to take some faculty time and effort to do this work moving forward. So where are we now? Next slide, please. Oh, I guess we could go one more, Guthrie, thanks. I'm excited to share with you today that using the promising practices from the Common Course Numbering Framework and building upon the recognition that we really did need to do some work in this space, I'm happy to say that after just 4.5 months of collaborative work, data analysis, and difficult conversations, we've been able to narrow down that giant list to 3 main career technical education courses designed to fit into multiple career cluster areas with enough variance allowed within the learning outcomes so that an individual institution could add in a couple of different learning outcomes so that what is in a management and entrepreneurship program under the applied business math might have a couple of different learning outcomes than digital technology may have, but their first 5 learning outcomes in the applied business math bucket are the same. And that follows very closely with the Common Course Numbering Framework, which allows for up to, I believe it's a 25% threshold of adding an additional course outcome. Next slide, please. There were some additional recommendations that came out on top of those 3 courses they've aligned and that are being recommended to be implemented statewide. Additional recommendations rose to the surface. The work group shared concerns that a July 1, 2027 full implementation date would be problematic for catalog deadlines and possible teach outs. So they wanted us to be very clear about that. They once again very clear about the need for the faculty support and PD, and then a couple of other pieces that came up. Ensuring that we do a course review of those 3 courses every 3 years to ensure alignment and to ensure that they're still workforce relevant. Industry changes fairly quickly, so if we visit those 3 CTE math courses on a frequent basis, that will help us make sure that what we're teaching is actually relevant in those career cluster areas. And then continued alignment conversations between career technical education, math, and adult basic education should continue. They should continue that collaboration, particularly as we continue our work on integrated education and training, which is a whole nother area of important work happening. So anticipated next steps. Guthrie, next slide. So we're bringing these recommendations to you. I've shared them with the President's Council and the Chief Academic Officers. We are planning, as I mentioned, in October, there'll be a presentation to all of you on the Community College Support Fund and a discussion about that. In December, we are expecting that it is highly possible that you will be taking action regarding potential Oregon administrative rule changes related to the CCSF. In June, we do an annual audit. We'll be pulling course information and sharing that with the colleges to ensure that anything is still coded in developmental education, math, and writing is, in fact, we're calling it a cleanup, but that those changes are made. After a really robust conversation with the Oregon's President's Council earlier this month, they voted to recommend that while they recognize there will be some hiccups, they're recommending that we stay with the July 1, 2027 final implementation target date for making any necessary funding changes to the funding formula. And with that, I am happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any commissioner have questions for Donna? Yes, Commissioner Middleton.
Thank you, Chair Heyman, and thank you, Donald Welling, for your work in this. I want to be clear that I think not funding developmental ed mathematics and developmental ed vocabulary skills and English skills at the community college level is a mistake. We've heard a ton of testimony about that. However, I do appreciate the work that Donna has done and her cohorts and the committee. I was able to go to some of the committee meetings where they discussed Math 102, 103, and 104, and I do believe that those are good courses to go with. I don't think we're going to be done with this once this starts up in July of 27, so I'm happy to see that there are built-in review processes. We know that in California, when they stop funding developmental ed, they're already rescinding that and changing to bring it back in. We can learn from their mistakes as they go, and I'm sure we will learn more as we go through this process. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Dembro.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. And Donna, thanks for all the work that you and the team have been doing. I'm very sympathetic to the comments just made by Commissioner Middleton. And one other sort of cause of concern I have is the analogy was made to community education and the decision by the legislature to no longer fund it, which, I understood that. But the effect of that was that the price for community ed classes, the cost of them was entirely through tuition. And we have seen over time a real change in the number of people who are taking community ed courses, where in the past people of modest means were able to take them. Now it's, we see more and more people, it's kind of reserved for the more affluent. And it's hard for me to see how that would work with developmental ed, since, so often the students who really need developmental ed are those who can least afford, to pay any tuition. So I wonder, can you speak to that? I mean, has there been discussion of if the colleges in fact continue to offer it at their own expense, how they'll pay for it or how students will pay for it? Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Denfro. Yeah, I can speak to that. There has been significant conversation about what happens with the students who would no longer be or who would not be placed in developmental education moving forward. Many of those students are actually appropriate for an adult basic education placement. These are many of the students have below an 8th grade level math proficiency and really need more of those foundational skills. So those students would indeed still be receiving services on campus through our adult basic education programs. Those students who are closer to being college math ready, we believe will still enroll and will benefit from a co-requisite, more intensive student support services model. We'll have to wait and see, of course, how the data shakes out. And that's why I'm also very glad to see that they want us to be looking at the courses at 3-year mark, because then at that point, we'll start to see completion data and success data that we can also take into consideration at that time.
Okay, thank you. I think there is a middle group, isn't there, between those who are, ready for a transfer course with the co-requisite and those who are, below 8th grade level and appropriate for ABE. It's kind of that middle group that I'm more concerned about.
We are hopeful that the CTE math course that we designed, the second one on quantitative literacy, will actually help with that particular piece. And we're also having conversations about Algebra 2, recognizing that there is a gap in that space as well. So as Commissioner Middleton alluded, we're not done yet, but we've made significant progress over the course of the last several months in doing the alignment on the CTE work and really removing a lot of the noise that was in what was known as Dev Ed at that time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Yes, Commissioner Smith.
Thank you. This isn't an area that I have any expertise in, so I'm really relying on your expertise, Donna, and the group of instructors and people who are the knowers who came together to work on this. I really appreciate that work. But I'm also taking very seriously public comment and real concerns from instructors and others who have advocated for a continuation of these kind of courses. And so I'm just thinking, and I, don't expect an answer or anything, but I'm just thinking how to communicate to assuage those concerns, really, because it sounds like there's some things in place that will be just set up to serve a variety of student knowledge levels. And it sounds like there might be some good coverage for all people who want to engage with our community colleges. So making sure that it's really communicated to the, because I really care so much about how our community college faculty and support staff care so much about their students and people in their community to be successful. And I don't want them to feel frustrated by this process. So I'm just concerned at how to bring those concerns into the process and make sure that it's communicated that their students will be served in an appropriate manner. That's
That is part of the reason for on that graphic where I showed 4 areas and mentioned the college implementation teams. That's one of the areas or one of the places that we're working towards. The professional development and technical assistance that we are going to be offering, I believe, is another place where we can help. There's also been some misunderstanding about particularly writing 115 and whether writing 115 was even part of this conversation, and it has not been. It's already labeled as a lower division collegiate course. It already transfers to a couple of universities. So that particular course that has been brought up several times actually has not even been in consideration with regards to this particular conversation around developmental education courses. So hopefully that helps a little bit.
Any other questions? Well, Donna, I appreciate your presentation. I think it gave us a much better understanding of where we are in this process. It's been a long process. I admit to my impatience, but it looks like we're moving forward. It's been 7 years since I was president, and so perhaps my information is outdated, but it seems to me that there are 2 issues that may or may not fit together well. One is a pathway to collegiate level math, and the other is the necessary math for CTE program. And at my institution, we looked at those as completely separate issues, and we developed, as you noted, discipline-specific math courses that fit into a welding curriculum or whatever, a health occupations curriculum, which it appears to me you're recommending in this model, but it really doesn't. The other issue is, does the developmental pathway for a traditional math program work? And I keep going back to the data, and you had mentioned, we've seen a report a number of times that raises questions about that, and so I know at my institution, I think again, it was less than 4% of people who started in a developmental pathway who ever even got to a college level math course, less than 4%. And so I don't know if the numbers have changed much since then, but that was disconcerting to me.
I can't speak to the current numbers, obviously, but it's my understanding, based upon what we have seen, the trend continues, which is why it's so important for us to get our pathways straightened out and get them shortened to the best efficiency as possible, while still recognizing that our students are individuals and they may need different supports along the way. So.
Thank you. Anything else? Donna, thank you for your presentation. We'll move on. I believe this next item is yours as well, program approval process overview. And it looks like Veronica is joining us for that as well. So.
Good afternoon, Chair Heyman and members of the commission. Yes, my colleague Donna and I would be doing this presentation. For the record, I am Veronica Dujon, and I'm the Director for Academic Policy and Authorization. The last time we talked to you about program approval in both community colleges and public universities was back in 2024. And it seemed about time, given some of the questions that have been raised and discussions that you've had in commission meetings to come back with a primer on how the staff assists the commissioners and the processes we use, the statutes that guide the processes we engage in, and the commissioner's responsibility in terms of program approval. What we'll go through these, we just have about 7 slides. Donna and I will alternate, and Donna will begin us off with the regulatory environment for program review and approval. Next
Thanks,
slide, please, Guthrie.
Thanks, Veronica. So Oregon's governance model places curriculum and academic program development primarily with each university or community college and its governing board. For universities, HECC retained a statewide approval responsibility for significant academic changes. Oregon Revised Statute 352.09 requires universities to submit those changes and establishes the criteria. ORS 350.075 states the Commission's approval responsibility, with Oregon Administrative Rule 715.13-0020 defines what counts as significant and requires the governing board to submit the proposal before the program begins. This is a degree level coordination function and not a course-by-course curriculum review. For colleges, Oregon Revised Statute 341.465 establishes the legal authority for colleges to award certificates and associate degrees, with Oregon Revised Statute 341.005 through 009 establishing authority for Bachelors of Applied Science and Bachelors of Science and Nursing degrees. And then if you're interested around what defines our course, certificate, and program approval requirements and processes, those can be found in Oregon Administrative Rule Series 589006. Next slide, please. So a lot happens with these proposals before they actually reach you as the commissioners. This slide here shows a very high-level view of the multiple layers of work that goes into bringing a proposal before you. First, you'll see that the institution develops the program and completes its academic review. On the public university side, you'll see early statewide coordination allows them gives other universities an opportunity to identify duplication, regional impacts, or collaboration. The Provost Council role is advisory in this. Consensus is preferred, but a majority recommendation may advance. Graduate programs receive external disciplinary review, and the institution completes its governance and governing board authorization. HECC staff then review the full record against the commission standards before bringing a recommendation to all of you at a public meeting. Next slide.
So I'll take this one. What requires commission review and approval? The rules that we follow essentially define the core set of changes that come to the commission. New undergraduate and graduate degree programs require approval, as would extending an existing degree more than 40 miles from its current approved site. And that would be on the public university side. New community college associates of applied science, bachelors of applied science, and most certificates of completion also come before the commission for approval. Significant changes to associates of applied science, bachelors of applied science, and most certificates of approval would come before you. The commission does not generally approve the following: new public university undergraduate and graduate certificates, new names for existing public university degree programs, new public university minors. And on the community college side, new or substantive changes to community college associates of applied science options, career pathway certificates of completion, certificates of completion related to an Associate of Applied Science, non-credit training certificates, employment skills training certificates, and occupational skills training certificates. The next slide, please. So what are the elements of the HECC staff review for public university programs? Staff organized the review around the same criteria, the same 4 criteria as you see here, the commission must apply in making its decision. We look at the mission alignment, whether any duplication is unnecessary, whether the location or delivery model will cause undue hardship, and whether the proposal helps meet statewide needs. The proposal and supporting material also have to address the quality outcomes, accreditation, faculty and separately resources such as library resources, external review, and sustainability and financial sustainability to maintain these programs. The staff recommendation captures how the proposal itself supports the conclusion under these standards. And in each of these, you will see the typical kinds of evidence we use as staff to ensure that these areas are being met. So with that, the next slide, please.
So with regards to the community colleges, just as Veronica shared, we review the same criteria and consider the same areas, but our evidence may look different. So you'll see, like, for instance, we'll be looking at PK20 alignment. Does it align with career learning areas and career clusters? What is some of the typical evidence for capacity around, do they have the facilities? How will they get the equipment that's necessary for the program to exist? Collaborative efforts, like what do their advisory committees look like? How have they engaged business and industry? Looking at labor market needs and what are the unmet employment demands, and then also taking a look at what the design is, what's the curriculum, the sequence, what are the learning outcomes look like, etc. And just as Veronica mentioned, the staff recommendation that comes before you should explain to you fully how the proposal supports the conclusion under these standards. Next slide, please. Building upon the work that we've already discussed for the associate's degree and certificates, Bachelors of Applied Science are actually held to 9 standards for the community colleges. The 9 standards are in the review criteria of the notice of application stage, which is the point where a college shows it can actually deliver the degree. Need and demand are established earlier in the statement of need. Those 9 standards ask the questions to determine whether or not the program is actually sound. It looks at things like, is it a real bachelor's degree? The curriculum has to demonstrate baccalaureate level rigor and with at least 60 upper division credits with 180 credit degree total. The program must be built for a specific occupational field. Can the college deliver it? Do they have qualified faculty and teaching resources? Are there enough clinical placements and industry sites where the program might depend upon them? Student services have to be scaled for the baccalaureate level students. And it must submit a 4-year financial plan showing that the program is sustainable, not simply able to launch. And does it fit Oregon's public interest? Any selective admissions processes must remain consistent with the college's open access mission. The college documents must show any collaboration with providers and with industry and discloses any concerns raised by any institution that might be remaining unresolved. So in closing, each of those criterion is scored met or unmet, and where met is rated as minimally meets, fully meets, or exceeds. Exceeds is reserved for work that could serve as an example for other colleges, so a strong proposal is not expected to earn it across the board. The staff recommendation should explain how the proposal supports the conclusion under these standards. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Veronica.
Thank you, Donna. And may we have the next slide? Thank you. So the key takeaway for the commissioners is the issue of governance. And that is the individual program decision or broader policy, this question. When a proposal comes before you, the commission must distinguish between the individual program decision as presented to you on its docket and broader policy questions that may arise as a result of a discussion that comes out of a discussion of the proposal. So the individual program decision, I should say, is essentially one about does the program or the proposal satisfy the standards currently established in statute, rule, and commission policies. That is the question that commissioners must decide. And the staff apply the existing approval criteria, consider the full record, and the commission has to consider the full record and staff recommendations. So that's the basis for the commission's decision. And in the end, the commission will either approve, disapprove, or seek clarification based on the current standards. So the commission really retains final authority and can approve or disapprove a proposal under the criteria. There's questions that might arise as a result of a discussion of a particular proposal, and these might lead the commission to want to discuss broader policy questions. So in these conditions, should the HECC change the standards, evidence, or process that will govern future proposals? Not the one on the docket that would need a decision in all fairness and transparency, but would the commissioners be interested in moving forward with different rules to accommodate the outcomes of conversations they might have? And these might be the outcome of these discussions might lead to amending administrative rules, revising procedures or required evidence when the review process should change, or applying changes prospectively and consistently across institutions. So if commissioners identify a broader concern about what evidence should be required or what the approval standard should be, the more consistent path is to revise the rules or procedures going forward for all proposals. And that really preserves the transparency, fairness, and consistent treatment across institutions, especially as they try to launch new programs. And with that, we've come to the end of our presentation, and we're happy to answer to the best of our ability any questions you might have.
We have questions for Veronica or Donna. Yes, Commissioner Dembro.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I really appreciate this presentation, and especially the place where you just left us, Veronica, in terms of thinking sort of big picture and how we want this to be, and whether this might cause us to entertain changes in the rules. I think it's really timely with the 4124 work that's going on, as we're really probing the relationship between the institutions, among the institutions, and seeking greater partnerships, et cetera. I have a particular question and then sort of a broader one. The particular one was provoked by looking at the proposal from Southwestern Oregon Community College for their program. I forget what it's called, but it's sort of human services oriented, and which I found very intriguing, very attractive. But one question that came to me was in seeking input from affected parties. I didn't see any mention of communications with the relevant licensing boards. The programs that they were talking about, were very career oriented and governed by a variety of licensing boards. And it seems like that should be part of the conversation, since the students are going to, need the approval of the licensing board. for their degrees. And so to involve the licensing boards and get their thoughts about this new degree at this point would seem relevant. So that's a first question. And
Okay.
Actually, why don't you address that while
Sure.
I think some more about my second?
Thank you, Commissioner Denbrough. So, in the statement of need, there is some conversation about aligning with the Oregon Health Authority, the Mental Health and Addiction Certification Board, for the standards related to the CADC. And also Mental Health Services Administration. So they have been speaking with many of the licensing bodies and accreditors and whatnot. We will see additional information coming in from the college as they go further through the process. But yes, that is definitely something we take into consideration. We definitely would not want to have the commission be approving programs that are not set up to meet licensure requirements. So we are keeping an eye on that as part of the process.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, I think it would be good to have as an articulated part of the process, that the records show input from the licensing boards, outreach to and input from, that kind of thing.
Okay. We'll make a note of that.
My second is just, the general observation about the difference between the process for the universities and the community colleges. And I'm just wondering how much of that is kind of an accident of history, and how much of it is how we want it to be. I was struck that with the universities, there is participation from the provosts before it goes to the HECC staff. So you do have that step of input, and there does seem to be more of a role for the other universities to play, which doesn't seem to be as much the case with the community colleges. And I understand that the community colleges are more inward focused on their communities, right? And there are geographical constraints. But I'm just wondering about again, as we're seeking more partnership, more collaboration, more joint kind of efforts, similar to what we saw with the community college education bachelors. To what extent does that become a conversation among the community colleges?
Yeah, go ahead, Veronica, if you'd like to.
You ask Senator Denbrough, Commissioner Denbrough, about the historical background, if it's from practice, precedent.
Yeah.
The universities, the public universities have typically rely heavily on governance arrangements with faculty and faculty control over the curriculum to make decisions. And with the formation of the HECC, when we began, initially, there was some concern with the dissolution of the Oregon University system that there was the risk of undue competition. And so the rules are written in such a way to improve collaboration, and where there is competition, it's a healthy competition in the sense that state resources are used most efficiently and in the best interest of both the state and the students. Through experience of proposals coming through the HECC, the statewide Provost Council, in collaboration with the HECC, have developed a process that involves both conversation among the provosts, where they give each other early notice of proposals they were thinking about, so they can discuss opportunities for collaboration or to iron out areas where they would have competition. And so we have come to an arrangement, a cooperative arrangement, where the provosts, to the extent that they can, will discuss their differences and will collaborate so most of the proposals that come to the HEC come with a consensual vote of approval from the Provost Council. That doesn't mean a proposal that does not have a consensual vote does not become before the commissioners, but that is the process that we have followed. And we do have a flow chart where we clearly identify the responsibilities of the institutions, the statewide Provost Council, commissioners, and how we resolve differences of opinion. But that process has evolved since the formation of the HEC because of the experiences we have had. And Donna, I will let you talk perhaps about the community college experience.
Yeah, thank you, Veronica. So Commissioner Dembro, we have a pretty large volume of certificate and degree approval that comes to the state through the community colleges. What I can tell you is that it's less formalized than the statewide provost council looking at every single, degree that comes forward for consideration for commission approval. But there is a lot of cross conversation about programs that are being designed or programs that are being considered at the community college level. And I think that the recent Bachelors of Applied Science and Education, the BSN Nursing Consortia, those are things where you will see that there is this increased amount of communication and collaboration happening with the community colleges to do exactly what it is you just mentioned, which is leveraging resources the best that we can, and also creating the most access points for students. So it's not as, it doesn't happen in the same way and at the same level as the state provost council, but there is collaboration and coordination happening amongst the institutional administrators.
Thank you both for that. I do think, I'll reiterate, I think this is going to be a good topic of conversation as we're doing the House Bill 4124 process, and thinking, as we're looking for ways to enhance the positive things that are already happening.
Yeah, thank you. I have a couple questions or comments. One, first, I'm going to thank you for this presentation. We've, on a number of occasions over the past year or so, had questions about program approvals that have come to us, and not understanding the process that went on before it came to us for a decision. So that's very helpful to see this kind of outline of the work that precedes the request for HEC approval. I have two specific. One is, I don't even know if this is a good idea, so I'm just, but in the current climate, and we've watched in other states where politics has begun to dictate the kind of curriculum or courses that are being taught in their higher education institutions. One of the concerns I have with regards to our program approval process is in some sense what we don't or can't consider in the approval process out of respect for the academic integrity of the individual institution. And I don't know how to better state that, but I think it's important that we recognize that that we're not in the business of curriculum, and right. And I know we all know that. I'm just trying to find, how can the average person read through this and go, okay, I understand that, and sort of what's our role, as opposed to maybe what's our role, what's the institution's role, might be another way of helping, I think, the community member understand, specifically what we do and don't do with regards to program approval. The other thing is, I guess I'd like to have a better understanding of how our process either duplicates or complements the program approvals that happens with our accrediting agency, in this case, Northwest typically, but it can be anyone now. I think sometimes it feels like we're both doing the same thing. And I guess I'd like to have a better understanding of what Northwest does that's different than what we do.
That's a very good question, Greg. Chair Heyman, thank you for that. We work closely, or there is a close relationship between the accrediting agency, the NWCCU, and the approval process that we engage in. So part of the process to get state approval is an accreditation evaluation that they do that feeds into our process. So the new programs that come from the public universities, the new degree proposals, have to go through a series of peer reviews with other schools that offer similar programs, or rather faculty, typically faculty from other schools that review the program to see if it meets the disciplinary expectations. And they also, the proposal also works, those proposing the program also work with NWCCU to make sure that they are in alignment with NWCCU standards. So there is a close collaboration that, and sometimes an institution making a proposal may be surprised or get caught up with, oh, I thought I had to do this first and then do that. And, you know, which one comes first and who supports what. Our state process relies heavily on NWCCU input, and they rely on us to close the loop to make sure programs are operating within the parameters and the authorities that they should.
Great. I guess this echoes a comment from Commissioner Dembro. I think I would appreciate that involvement with Northwest Commission to be better articulated in this process, in the same sense that where we are looking at in external certificating agencies, especially in areas like healthcare or some career technical areas, that would be articulated in the way in which we present this work. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Veronica or Donna on this issue? And again, I want to thank you for making this presentation. Seeing none, we will move on. We have already completed item number 12. So we're moving to item 13, which is for the good of the order. This is an opportunity for a commissioner to not have a full conversation, but to make a suggestion or with regards to future work of the commission, or something we might want to address in a future meeting, or maybe just something you want to, you know, be grateful for, I guess, in a long meeting like this, you know. But anyway, it's open up, and I don't want to be over directed, but if there's anything that a commissioner would like to add to this meeting's record, I would appreciate that. Yes, Commissioner Davis, Boucher.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Heyman. I just want to say I just kind of circle back on the Oregon Tribal Student Grant, and just want to thank all of our public commenters from this morning. And I did just want to echo Chance White Eyes, who spoke earlier as well, because I stand pretty well with him. I work with him and other tribal leaders in Oregon, and so I know that the grant is super important. And so I just want to echo that if there is a possibility of doing the emergency board ask sooner than December, I think that would be something that we should consider, hopefully. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that input. Thanks so much. Commissioner Devereaux.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just wanted to let the Commission know about some work that's going on around prison education and reentry. You'll remember back in November, we did a presentation on what's going on there. And I think it was mentioned then that Oregon had applied for a Jobs for the Future grant under a program called Fair Chance to Advance, which is focused on helping states to align their efforts between corrections, education, workforce, so that we can better create seamless pathways for people while they're inside institutions as they transition out. Oregon, I think it's been reported that Oregon was one of the 4 states that was chosen to lead this effort, to pilot this effort. The other 3 are Kansas, Maine, and North Carolina. And this work has begun. It's a very extensive group of people involved, including many from the HECC, in helping to do this work. And I want to especially call out Donna Llewellyn and especially Shali Hudson. Shali is kind of running herd on all of us doing this work. There's an education subcommittee, a policy subcommittee, a data subcommittee, a workforce subcommittee, with a lot of people from all around the state involved in this effort. So at some point we'll probably, I don't know, I haven't talked to Shali or Don about this, but we should give a status update to the commission to let you know how it's going. But just wanted to let you know about that work. It's very encouraging.
Thank you, Commissioner Dembro. And I, yes, would appreciate at some appropriate time update, a presentation on that work. I used to be involved in that, as you know, and I would like to know more about how that is progressing. So I appreciate for your reminding us of that. Anything else? Yes, Commissioner Middleton.
I just want to give a shout out to Guthrie and his organization that he does. I had a well problem, had to call in a repair person, and he just kept me informed, and when we were up for a vote, and kept me connected with the meeting, even though I had to step away several times to deal with the repair person. So Guthrie, thank you for all the work that you do.
Thank you, Guthrie. Yes.
Much appreciated.
Thanks for doing that, Rick. Anything else? We are then adjourned. Thank you so much for sticking with it. It's a long meeting, but we had important stuff to address, and I really greatly appreciate your participation in this work. So we are done.
Good job, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.